Welcome to the TCG Compass podcast, presented by Amber Grading, a mostly weekly discussion on trading card games and the people who love them.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's episode of the TCG Compass podcast. My name is Daniel, and today I'm joined with the CEO of Amber Grading, Emil.
Hello.
How's it going today, Emil? What do you got for us?
Well, I'm doing great, first of all. Second of all, what do I got for you? Well, it's actually what you've got for us. So, Daniel, today you published a new blog post titled, "What is Objective Grading and Why Should It Matter to You?" So if anyone wants to find that, maybe read it before they continue listening or watching this, just go to ambergrading.com, no E in the word amber, ambrgrading.com, and look at the blog section, and you'll see this really, really interesting new post by Daniel. So I'm going to turn the tables on you, Daniel, and I'm going to ask you some questions.
Sure, let's have it.
About what this post is about, and why we really think it matters such a huge amount. So what is objective grading?
Well, to back up just a little bit, the reason that Amber Grading exists and the reason why we have a company is because we noticed that there was problems with the existing market and the way that grading was being conducted. Mainly that there was not much consistency, that sending in a card to some of the major graders kind of felt like gambling. You would send in a card having no idea what you were going to get back, and you could get anything from a 6 to a 10, and then in some cases, people would crack their cases open, resend them back in, and then get a completely different grade. Now, to me, that feels a little disingenuous, and that is one of the reasons why Amber Grading exists and why we now have something called objective grading. So objective grading is basically looking at every single independent every single criteria of a card independently. So that's every corner, every edge, both the surfaces, and all 8 centering aspects. And what that allows us to do is to break down the grading process to a more simple, easy to follow process that allows for a more consistent result. And what I mean by that is if you just look at the corner of a card and then you compare that against criteria, let's say the corner has a little bit of wear and it looks like what the criteria describes as a 6. Well, then you only have to enter that 6 into a calculator that follows an algorithm. There's no real thinking. It's more of just looking, observing, and then reporting. And then the algorithm takes it from there to provide a consistent result. That way, no matter who is grading, you're going to get the same or a very similar result. And to kind of make that process a little more streamlined, a little more consistent, it requires 2 people, 2 separate graders, to look at a card and enter their results and then rectify those results or compare them to determine what the correct answer is. And what you end up with is a very streamlined process that provides consistent results every single time.
All right. So what I'm hearing you say is that you've been collecting cards, trading cards, buying and selling cards, playing these games for 30 years, something like that, right? And your experience with the existing grading companies before Amber Grading came along is that it was really inconsistent, right? So you'd send in a card and you really didn't know what you would get. And a real sense, whether it's true or not, a real sense that it was really up to sort of the mood and the intuition or the gut feeling of whoever it was that was grading your card, which means, maybe if they grade it just before lunch when they're feeling a little hungry, maybe you get a bad grade. If they're having a really good day, you get a really good grade. And so what you and many people that get cards graded and want to sell cards sort of learnt that they could do is if they get a card back with a grade they weren't happy with, they'd send it in and they'd get something different, usually higher. Now, why is that a problem? Why does that bother you?
Well, as a collector, I want my card to be represented for exactly what it is, especially as somebody who likes to buy cards and sell cards. If I'm buying something that's marked as a 10, I expect that card to be perfect. And if it shows up and it's clearly not a 10, then I feel like I've gotten ripped off. And I know a lot of other collectors feel the exact same way. And that's a big problem, that it kind of sows distrust in the industry, in the market, and it's really not good for collectors as a whole. Now, resellers, it's probably great because, they're taking these cards, resubmitting them, getting huge multipliers on cards that aren't 10s, that are being marked as 10s. And really, the only people who are benefiting from that are these big grading companies who don't really care about creating a consistent process or a consistent product. And, the average collector like myself, we're the people who suffer from this in the end.
Yeah. So, okay. So when, back in the before times when we were thinking about, do we start amber grading or not? We looked at a few things that can really distinguish us as a new company from the rest of the market. And one of those things, one of those key things, is this more scientific, more objective approach to grading. And so you came up with the term, well, let's call it objective grading, because that's exactly what it is. So we do everything we can, and we've proven our system to reliably and repeatably give the same grade to the same card every single time. So we now know it's possible. Arguably we didn't know it was possible when we started, but you largely, with the help of the rest of our team, developed this grading system. And we've now been offering that to the public for quite a while. Now, are there any downsides to this? Are there things about it that you or our customers don't like?
Well, one thing that happens, and what I've heard, not too often, but occasionally, is that people just really want a high grade. They don't really care what the card actually is. They just want a high score. And objective grading does not provide that. There are some people who just want to get the highest grade possible because they're just flipping the card. They're not trying to collect it. They don't care about holding it. It's not going to be the prize of their collection. It's just something they're going to throw on eBay and sell. And objective grading is not a good tool for that because it's not going to get you the highest amount of profit off of every single card you submit. But what it is going to do is going to give you a fair, objective, impartially graded card. And that's really important for collectors, at least for myself. And I understand that this is not for everybody, but it is for the person who really cares about getting a fair grade and having something that's, they can count on, rely on, and if they go to sell it, eventually the buyer is not going to come back and be like, well, this is not the grade that it says it is, which I think is really important. I think that fair and trustworthiness is really important to a grading service.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I agree, right? But we also know that many of our customers agree. So one thing I've heard from some of our customers, when they get a grade that's, a little lower than they otherwise would have liked, is this sort of begrudging respect for the grade, right? Like, I only got a 6 and I really wanted to get an 8 or something like that. But I understand why it's a 6. The digital report explains to me why it's a 6. I can see why it's a 6. And all things, all those other considerations about flipping it and value and all of that, what they really love, even when they're a little disappointed with the grade they get, is they know that it's done objectively, it's done scientifically. It's not a low grade because you had a bad day, right? And they also know that means that if they're buying amber cards or amber graded cards, they know exactly what they're getting. So on your blog post, you've included some pretty interesting images. We're not going to name the companies here, but if you go to the blog post, you'll be able to see the images. We didn't edit the images at all. They were put up by people in the card collecting, card grading community. And so they've made that choice to make that public. And we've linked exactly where we got everything from. Yeah, so if you go to the blog post that you wrote, there's some really interesting images that are a mix of humorous and extremely upsetting, depending on your point of view. There's really a good example of a Mutu that was sent in by a person. They sent it in 3 times to 3 different companies. The first time to company A, they got an 8.5. The second time they sent it in, this time to company B, they got a 6. And then the third time they sent it into company C and they got a 9.5, which is where that card lives today. This is the best card that they got. I can understand why people would want to hunt for higher grades. I totally get that. But to your point earlier, this really makes me question if this is what the grading industry is, if this is what the grading industry can do, what's the point of it?
Yeah, so you've kind of hit the nail on the head here. There's one glaring issue with the grading industry, and that is that there is no standard. There is no one overarching rule of law that says if your card is a 9, it has to meet this criteria. And part of that is because there's not a lot of transparency in the industry, right? Like the PSA's grading criteria, they give like vague descriptions of what a certain grade will look like. And to be honest, that's probably what they use to actually grade the card, but it's just not descriptive enough because as you go lower into the scores, or if you look at different subgrades and you try to evaluate things, you can't really encapsulate what a 6 is with a 1 sentence or 2 sentence description, because there are so many different things that could feed into like what that might look like if all the corners say, oh, they're all a 6. Well, there's a lot of different variables that feed into that. And then when you zoom out to the overall score of the entire card, you say, oh, well, the entire card is a 6. Well, I don't think it's really feasible for the average person to look at a card and calculate all of these things internally and then come out with a consistent grade. Because what's going to happen is they're going to have bias. They're going to be there's going to be some subjectivity.
Humans aren't computers.
Exactly,
right?
They're not, and that's why we really need to rely on a computer and an algorithm, because that way you have consistency. And we haven't done this yet, but our intention is to not only release our criteria, but also release our grading calculator, so that way our customers can go on using our criteria and our calculator and evaluate their card, and that way they'll have at least a good idea of what kind of grade they're going to get. And we understand that, some people might just use that calculator and they'll be happy and satisfied with, just knowing whatever it is, and that's fine. But at the same time, we don't want to have a gambling grading service. We don't want people to send stuff in and think like, oh, I've got a 10 for sure, and then come back with an 8 and have no idea why. We want people to be able to evaluate their own cards adequately and then at least have some semblance within a grade of knowing what they're going to get back.
Yeah, so this is something we've talked about since day one, which is the idea of developing our criteria, developing our algorithm, testing it, proving it out, improving it as needed. Though so far, after doing thousands of cards, we're getting exactly the results that we expected the system to give us. So, another real positive for the scientific approach to things. But from day one, we've always said that we intend to open source this system, right? And to your point, that allows our customers, before they even send the cards to us, they're going to be able to use our system and know pretty close what grade their card's going to get when they get back to us. And the only reason I say pretty close is they don't have the training, they don't have the experience, and they don't have the equipment we have, or at least most of them don't. And so we're really excited to offer this. We're not offering it quite yet. We're not quite ready. We need to improve a few things on how it's documented and all of that. But if you're watching this, if you're listening to this, know that in the relatively near future, we're going to be open sourcing all of that. The other reason we're doing it is to put, I don't want to say pressure, but put an expectation from us and from our customers on the rest of the industry that, guys, you can do better. You can be more objective. This can be much less based on the feelings or the instincts or the gut of your experts that do the grading for you, and you can get better. And our hope is, over time, that our industry that we're in now, that the grading industry, adopts standards that are good for the consumer, that are good for the customer, right? It is not okay the way things are right now, and we're here. One of the reasons we're here is to make that much better for anyone that grades cards or buys graded cards.
Yep. And to be fair, we only address the TCG market. There's a whole other half with sports cards. But what we'd like to do is not only see improvement, but to continue to improve too. We've come up with this grading algorithm. We've come up with this process called objective grading. But that's not it. It's not just, it just doesn't end there. It's continual improvement. And what we'd like to do is create a process that can be repeated by anybody and potentially adopted by the industry, at least in essence,
And to be clear, we mean our competition, right? We want our competition to improve too,
right?
Because we're not the right company for everybody.
Correct.
We offer different sorts of things, and in later episodes we're going to talk about those other things.
Correct.
Aesthetics and turnaround times and pricing and all of these other sorts of things. But today we're talking about objective grading, and we're talking about how we sincerely hope that our competitors pay attention to what we're doing and get better, so that if we're not the right company for a given person, that they're going to get better service, they're going to get better product from our competition.
Yeah, hopefully a lot fewer Reddit posts of people with, hey, I took my 4 and submitted it and got an 8. That's not good for anybody, except for the company that did it, because they're making money, and I just don't believe in a business model where, people can resubmit low cards and get higher cards because you're just paying for the grade. And I just don't believe that's a good way to do business, and it's not a good way to maintain a market.
Absolutely. So on this blog post, which again is at ambergrading.com, and the title of the blog post is "What is Objective Grading and Why Should It Matter to You?" And if you're watching this far in the future, it was published on January the 10th, 2023. If you need help finding it, because Daniel's always writing blog posts, and it'll end up deep in the archives one of these days soon. And on this post, you've included a bunch of really interesting images. So I already talked about one of them. The other one that really grinds my gears is a card that was graded a 10, a perfect, pristine card. And the original post of this is on Reddit. Shows the back of it as well. And it's beat to heck, man. It is not a 10. But it looks like the grader, didn't even look at the back.
Yeah.
Didn't even look.
Makes me wonder if they even looked at the front. And to be fair, we're not here trying to tear down anybody in the industry. For every bad piece of work a certain company does, I'm sure they do lots of good work as well. What we're trying to call out here is that with an objective grading process that uses defined criteria, something like this should never happen. When we put our name on the top of a card, on the top of a slab, and we send it out, we're putting our reputation behind that, which is from every intake specialist to every grader to every person who does Q&A on it. They're looking to check to make sure that quality is behind it. Now, we don't do the volumes of these massive companies, right? We don't have nearly as many employees, which is to our benefit because we're able to control a lot more. But at the same time, if a system is in place to make sure that cards are graded the same way by every single grader using objective criteria, something like this should never happen. And that's our problem, and that's what we're trying to get at.
All right. So if you're just sort of like a normal person, you might want to click away here because we're going to get really, really nerdy. So, just fair warning. So Daniel, as we developed, as you had lead on this project on developing this system. Why did you make some of the choices you made about the inputs into the algorithm and the algorithm itself?
Yeah, so a lot of my personal experiences kind of fed into the eventual outcome. Some of them with, military background, safety background, but one of them is like a real interest in behavioral economics and how people make decisions and how to create the most consistent decision-making process that you can. And one of the people that really influenced me was Daniel Kahneman. He's a Nobel laureate, a behavioral economist, probably the leading one in the world. I'm not really sure how you'd evaluate that. But some of the case studies that he evaluated were how judges make decisions and does the time of day determine how, a decision a judge makes? And the same things for doctors, like are prognoses or diagnoses affected by the time of day that a doctor is given a certain patient? And it turns out, yes, that there is actually quite a bit of subjectivity to these things, and that these subjective determinations can be affected if systems are in place. And when I was reading this, I was thinking like, wow, this could be something that really changes the grading industry. Like this could completely revolutionize how a card is graded, because if we remove some of this subjectivity or we don't allow it to even have a place in the process, then the outcome could be a lot more consistent. And that was really like the inspiring moment when I was reading, I think it was Noise by Daniel Kahneman, because all of that is reducing statistical noise and like looking at all of this data and how to actually pull out what matters and creating systems that are repeatable.
Yeah. So Danny, when you first came to me with these ideas on how to apply them to the grading industry, it got me really excited, right? Because I'm a nerd in a different way, right? You have your military background and safety background and all of these things that you've mentioned. I'm a software engineer. I like things to work in deterministic ways. I've been a principal investigator for the National Science Foundation. I don't just I live by the scientific method, right? Can we reproduce things? Is this actually true, or does it just appear to be true?
Exactly.
Are there other things that sort of confound this analysis, or are we pointing the arrow between cause and effect the wrong way? All of these sorts of things. And so as you started and then continued to build on this system, it just spoke right to my heart, man. Right to my heart.
Well, you had a big part to it, as somebody who has very little coding experience. You really helped with the algorithm and making the algorithm work in a way that was clean and to get predictable outcomes. And I learned a lot, and doing that and taking part in the project in that respect is something I didn't expect to do, but I'm really happy I did, because it gave me this whole new respect for coding and building software, and having to write something so explicitly that, because the computer can only do exactly what you tell it to do.
Yeah, that's
right.
Correct,
and it really fed into refining the process and refining the algorithm, because you think you have an idea of how you want it to work, and then you actually write it out and it doesn't give you the outcome you expect, and you got to figure out why. And that really led into creating a better process. So it was really cool.
Yeah, the power of collaboration, right?
Yeah, exactly.
People with different backgrounds, different experiences, different skill sets.
Definitely.
Is absolutely wonderful.
Yeah.
Right. So the assigned reading is all of Kahneman's books. They really are actually good reading. If you haven't ever read any of his books, pick one up and read it. It's fascinating stuff.
Yeah, Thinking Fast and Slow is probably where I'd start.
And that's probably the most famous one too. So.
Yeah, if you're not interested in economics or how people make decisions or anything like that, don't even start. But if you have any kind of interest in that stuff, you'll be blown away, and it reveals a lot about us as people too, and how we make decisions.
Right. All right. So in a future but near future episode, we're going to talk about the aesthetics. And why that matters to us, why that matters to our customers, how we developed our case, how we build our case, how it all gets put together, and why Amber's slabs, our graded cards in Amber cases look, well, let's be frank, look incredibly different than everything else.
Yeah, and our labels will never fall out of their holder. I've seen so many situations where a little piece of paper or a little piece of metal on the top just falls out sometime between getting shipped. That could never happen with an Amber grading case. Really cool.
But don't give too much away, because that's in a later episode, right? And we're going to talk about our the way our customers interact with us on the software side. By the way, just so you know, I write most of our software right now. Our team's growing. But what that basically means is if you ever encounter a bug or a problem, it's 100% my fault. And you can, our main, catch-all email address is hello@ambergrading.com. You can send angry messages directed at me. Don't be too mean, but do send any problems you have so we can fix them, please.
Right. Yep. Well, you guys know where to find us, because obviously here, but in case you're looking for an objective grading service, you can head over to ambergrading.com. And if you'd like to see more, you can always check us out at TCG Compass. I think that's all we have. Anything else, Emil?
I'll just add on our website, you'll see a link to Discord. If you know what Discord is, you've probably already clicked on it. If you don't, it's sort of like an online forum meets Zoom meetings kind of a thing. And so we've got a really robust and growing community there. And we host and are going to be hosting more events with our community. So if you want to ask us questions directly, chat with us, maybe play some games with us, just hang out, chill. We really think it's important to know as many of you as possible, so we can be the best grading company we can be for you.
Yeah, folks. Absolutely. And if you have any feedback at all, Discord's a great place to give it to us, or you could always email us at hello@ambergrading.com. We'd love to hear from you.
That's right. Thank you so much.
Have a good one.
This has been the TCG Compass Podcast, presented by Amber Grading. Thanks for listening. You can find us at ambergrading.com/TCG Compass. at Amber Grading on Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook. Or drop us an email, tcgcompass@ambergrading.com.